Welcome to Pathway to Property, your go-to podcast for building a property portfolio and breaking down property markets.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm here in the studio for our next episode, Pathway to Property. I'm joined, as always, by Big Lukey Clifford.
Hey,
Lukey, how are you, mate?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Pretty good. I just came off a brutal 72-hour fast.
Oh,
So yeah, body's feeling good.
A temple?
Got that mental clarity back.
yeah.
I'm ready for the back end or back half of this year, should I say?
Remember you were feeling a bit fuzzy beforehand.
I
It's
was
just
a little bit.
just a bit of a system reset, like a reboot.
A little bit, mate.
Yeah?
Yeah. I don't know. I think you overwork me, mate. I think that's what it is. To be
Yeah, I
honest
do.
with you.
You know what? I probably do. But if all I've got to do is get you a bit of bone broth every quarter,
Yeah.
you know,
Should do the trick.
what's that? What do you two a day?
Yeah.
Two bone broths a day. Is that it?
Yeah. I actually didn't break my my fast with bone broth though.
Oh, you didn't this time?
No.
Interesting.
The last time I did it, well, the very first time I did the 72-hour fast, I broke it with like fries and a brisket.
Yeah,
Which was not the ideal meal to break a fast with. And then after that,
Well, it depends on what you want, though. I mean, it didn't. One train of thought is the perfect meal to break it with.
yeah, but this time round, I did it with boiled eggs and avocado. So just trying to provide the body with the nutrients it needs to perform at that next level.
Hey, that's a bit of health is wealth there. Far out. Well,
How have you been, mate?
Oh, mate, pretty good. I mean, I've been pretty busy. There's been a few exciting things going on.
Indeed.
Some very big and exciting things going on. Should I elaborate?
Yeah, I think you should dangle the carrot a little bit.
Well, it's as you know better than most. There's been a very, very exciting development for Atlas, and then also I guess myself. And that development is that I've jumped on and I've joined the cast of a major Channel 9 property show.
Ooh.
Called Budget Battlers. They had their season 1 last year. They did incredibly well, primetime Channel 9. So we're back. Well, they're back, and I'm joining them for season 2 this year.
Yeah.
We've already started filming, so we're already done a week of filming. And for those of you who haven't watched the show, it's a fantastic show about helping people out in the community whose homes need a little bit of TLC. But for various reasons, they might not be able to afford to, or they might not be in the position to do it. But they're usually, pillars in their community and have really strong, supportive family and friends, and everyone comes together to help them.
Right.
And my role is I've joined them as their investment expert. They want to take the show to the next level.
Oh,
They
here we
wanted
go.
to-
Here we go.
They wanted to bring somebody in to, be able to give that investment perspective to not only help improve the home for the people living in it, but also, to help them continue generating their wealth. So
Very cool.
Yeah,
Very
so
cool.
I've joined as the investment expert. So we'll be on later this year, Channel 9 prime time.
Exciting.
And we've got a bunch of episodes that are gonna be coming out. So I'm on the whole season. So
Well, mate, that's very exciting. My only question to you is, with the going joke in the office with you being the baby face assassin,
yes,
right?
yes.
Are you thinking that they're going to be able to, take you seriously, being the property expert and everything
able
like
to
that?
take me seriously. All I have to do is send them this podcast, mate, and they'll know. They know exactly
Here we
what's
go.
up.
Here we go.
Nah, it's cool. It's good, exciting stuff.
That's awesome, mate.
And mate, you and everyone else, fantastic at holding down the fort when I'm filming. Obviously, in between all the cameras, the lights, camera, action, I do spend pretty much the rest of the time on the phone when I'm not working on the house itself, getting my own hands dirty there. But mate, very exciting. I think probably more to the point, what's awesome about it is getting to share some of those investment insights with the rest of the country in a primetime slot, as well as then helping out some people that really do need a helping hand. And it's just awesome to be able to help them out. The first house that we did that we've recently wrapped up filming on. Amazing story. I can't give too much away, but absolutely amazing. And being able to see what we were able to do for them and help them out. it's life changing. It's absolutely life
Very
changing,
good, man.
and it's good for the soul as well. It's very good for the soul.
Very wholesome. Very
Yes,
wholesome.
absolutely, mate. Well,
Mate, we've got a good episode ahead of us. We had such strong feedback from the last episode, people leaving emails and texts and ringing through.
I feel like I say that all the time.
We do.
It's just,
We do.
I don't know what it is. We get a really strong, we get quite a visceral response, don't we? Like sometimes people calling up telling us that we're wrong, which is fun, but we always get such a great response, like you said. But I think that's awesome because feedback's amazing.
Yeah. Well, what are we looking at today, mate?
What are we looking at today?
What have we got in store?
What have we got in store? Well, what we've got for everybody today is we're going to be looking at what property investors can learn from business owners. And I thought this would be a bit of a different way to spin on some of the stuff we're going to be talking about today, which is a bit around the mindset, a bit around how to, really successfully run a property portfolio. And I think that there's a lot of synergies that come with people who do run a business. And, obviously I can talk a lot from my experience, but you also see some of the inner workings. So, it's, that's, I know you're going to have some awesome insights on this as well. But at the end of the day, people's property portfolios are like a business. And that's how the best investors really think. And they think more like they're a business owner rather than a home buyer. And I think that's why you see scenarios where people get to that sort of, 2 or 3 properties and they statistically have done quite well for themselves, right, in terms of like property ownership stats. But a lot of them really don't know where they're going and they're quite lost. They sort of get to that second, third, and they start kind of looking around and they're like, I own these properties, but I'm not filthy rich yet. Like, I don't understand how is this going to kind of help. And I know that I won't put words in your mouth, but my experience is that when you go and kind of dive into it and unpack it a little bit, you can often end up in this scenario where they're not thinking like that business owner. They're not thinking like somebody who's got a really strong property background. So they just end up kind of almost like Monopoly, just collecting assets, but don't really have a plan on how they're going to win the game.
Yeah, you're just collecting mortgages.
Yeah,
effectively.
Yeah.
But I guess why do you think so many investors really stop thinking after the purchase? Like, what is it about property that makes people think, set and forget is just enough, I guess, from your perspective?
It's a really good question, actually. I'm not prepared for an answer on that. What do I think makes people like that? I think that in Australia, like, it's not just Australia, but I think in Australia, it's very prevalent. Like, we have this fascination with property, and being a homeowner is like the great Australian dream, right? And I think that when people go and buy a property, or they get to their second or their third, right? It feels like the success is in achieving the purchase rather than the success being what the purchasers give you down the road.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that, because so much effort has to go into usually getting to that point. Yeah, to me, it's almost like people go, well, that's the win. I now own this property. I now own this second property. Like, that's the win.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it gives me. I now get to go to the barbecue and say, I own 2 properties.
Yeah.
Rather than thinking about, well, like I could go and I can register a company with ASIC and I can call myself a CEO. But what is it? Does that make me a CEO?
Yeah.
Am I, like the reason people might want to do that is because of, you see the movies and the stuff. And it's like, oh, these CEOs and they're all these big hotshots, right? Like you can get yourself the title, but are you really fulfilling what is meant by the title, Or in this case, you can buy property, but are you really fulfilling what's meant from buying property, which is that overall financial security? So it was a really long-winded answer from me. I don't know. Did any of that jag with you?
I think that certainly resonates with me. What we typically see with a lot of people that come through the door that have, 3 properties in their portfolio is they don't really often know where they're going with it. They've just literally what you were saying before. They've just gone out there, they've bought assets just because they've got the serviceability or the cash to be able to deploy. But there's no really foresight on what they really want those properties to do for them. And at the end of the day, like when you get involved in something, don't you want to strive to be the best that you possibly can be at something? You don't just want to have runs on the board for the sake of it, right? So I think this episode's really about how can you kind of look to extract that extra 1 to 2% about how you go about things to get a greater outcome overall.
I'm actually going to completely disagree with you.
How do you mean?
How I mean is, it's not about how you get the 1 to 2%. It's how do you get the 30 to 40%.
He's going into the whole capital growth play there. I like that.
But seriously, I think yes, there are 1 and 2% gains that can be made. But I think overall, there is so much lost opportunity cost in a lot of people's portfolios when they're around that, say, 2 to 3 property mark.
Yeah.
And they could really be extracting at 30, 40%, not 1 to 2%. But they're not, for me, they're not thinking like a portfolio operator or a portfolio manager.
Yeah.
They're just thinking like some bloke, some chick, some family that owns a couple of properties and they've worked hard to be in that spot. But that's it. That's to them. That's like the book is now closed. There's no more. There's no second chapter. There's no sequel.
But do you think that kind of ties into the fact that property is inherently a long-term asset class, and property over the last 30, 40 years, you're probably looking at an average growth rate of around that 7% mark, give or take, right? So they're kind of like, well, you know what? Like if I just have it there chipping away in the background, over the next 10, 20 years, it's going to serve its purpose, kind of thing. But what they're probably not thinking about is if you actually kind of reviewed the property at a deeper level and made some minor adjustments along the way to that 10-year, 15-year goal, what kind of outcome would you be sitting at that point in time compared to if you just let it sit and play the waiting game?
Well, I think that's the thing though, right? That's where people go from being the casual investor to being the strategic operator, right? And it's a very hard shift for a lot of people because like you said, it's because there is that timings issue of it being a long-term asset, it is very easy to set and forget, right?
Yeah.
Especially if there's nothing going wrong. We often always talk about like, oh, I had to give all this attention because this was happening, or, I had an issue with the tenant here or whatever. But I feel like some of the most dangerous times can be when there's nothing going on, and then suddenly a year or two goes by, and nothing's happened.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what could we have actually been doing with the asset? In that time period.
That's actually a very fair point, right? Like I spoke to a client not too long ago, and we're actually having a look at their existing portfolio, and he had this property. I forget which state it was based in or what asset type it was, but he held this property for 5 years. And when we're going through the performance of it, I think it only went up by like 30, 40 grand. And I posed a question to him. I was like, well, when was the last time you really kind of dug deep into the market, did analysis on it, crunched the numbers? And he was like, I've never done it. Like I've just kind of just bought it and just had it there sitting. And then 5 years down the road, when I've had a look at the performance of it, it's been extremely underwhelming. And it's been a bit of a handbrake in allowing him to expand as efficiently as possible, right? It's kind of like, if you're a business owner and you've got 3 cafes, but you have no idea if anybody's walking through the door of those cafes, what is the point, right? Are they really going to get you to where you want to get to, right?
It's, yeah, I just think it's so easy for people to get lost in the sea of it, right? And to me, that's the part that almost hurts me the most, is people who start strong and finish weak. And it comes from like the story you told, or from laziness, or from life gets in the way, or even like what you said, the property market, like it does all right. Like over the long run, it'll be okay. But the difference being somebody, and you don't have to go and own 10 properties, right? Like I certainly don't want people to think that's the advocation that's going on here. It's not about that. But it's about the fact that that by not thinking like a portfolio manager, like a portfolio operator, like you don't give yourself, or people are not putting themselves in that position to make other choices, i.e. buying more or buying different or doing other things.
Yeah.
And they almost take that choice away from themselves. So then they're stuck. And all they can do is sit and wait, right? But for me, like if we bring it back to that idea of like a business, right? Like buying a property is almost like a business transaction, right? Like it's you're buying another business, you're procuring a service, whatever it might be. But then managing and growing that portfolio is a business function. Like that's a core thing. Like, you know, like Microsoft, a core part of Microsoft, a core business function is their the Windows set of software, right? You can think of a million other examples, right? But you know, people forget that, and they forget that around property. Like your core function is to manage it and grow it, and the growth might stop at a certain point, but that's out of conscious decision, not out of willful ignorance.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's about also like where does your motivation lie, right? Like, you know, when you're looking to do something like this, money doesn't necessarily need to be the motivation. And you know what? I was speaking to one of my mates. This is probably last week sometime. He said to me, he's like, me and my partner, like, we actually don't want to invest in property. We just don't want the stress of that. We just want to be able to spend time with our kids and things like that, which is fine. He was like to me, I'm not fussed about money. I don't want to make money. And I'm like, but it's not money that is the motivation. It's about what
it gives you.
Yeah. Right? Like if you're able to, you know, build your wealth and put yourself in a position where you can go on more holidays later down the road, spend a lot more time with your kids, maybe help family and friends out that you actually want to help, right? Like you're just going to get such a better quality of life doing something like that, in my opinion, right? And I want people to be hungry to try to strive for that. I feel like some people are just very passive about it, and obviously each to their own, but I think what we want to obviously instill is that motivation in people to go out and get what you can actually achieve, right, if you put the work in. Yeah.
I think that if we bring that back to this whole idea about like what property investors can learn from business owners, right? I think we really come back to that strategy side, right? And I think there's three probably like very core business principles that property investors, if they don't know it, they definitely need to know it. But before we do that, I think the reason why that these principles are so important is probably a more important part of the conversation, right? And for me, it's because like I look at myself as a business owner, right? I don't go and chase a small or random or off the beaten path win, right? Everything has to be strategic, right? Whether like I don't hire another staff member to give you another bloke to have a beer with. That's just a nice byproduct because I hire good people, right? No, but I don't do that to just be able to say I have an extra employee that works for me so I can go off to the pub with other mates of mine and say, oh my God, I employ all these people, right?
Yeah.
I do it because that person gives me a win, which gives our clients a win, which gives our overall business a win and drives us forward, right? But all of that comes because when you're a business owner, you have to meticulously track performance, cash flows, you know, growth plans, strategic plans, you know, everything is so intentional.
Yeah.
Because it's not like, I mean, I'm sure we don't need to air the dirty laundry out here, but I'm sure you can think of decisions that you've thought that I've made that you probably didn't agree with, or you thought I was going down.
Just a few, mate.
Just a
couple.
But, you know,
but lucky I pulled you back in line.
You saved me from the edge, mate. But you know, everything is so intentional as a business owner, right?
Yeah.
And I think that property investors, property portfolio managers or operators, right?
Yeah.
They need to think the same way. Everything you do has to be really intentional, right? Like, I'll give you an example. There's a lot of people out there who want to, for whatever reason it might be, right, give their tenants a lighter rent than market rent, right? And a lot of the time, right, that also happens because they don't really think too intentionally about it. They don't think too strategically about it. They just go, oh, you know what? They've been a good tenant. Yeah, market rent's gone up by 50. Market rent's now $600. They're on 510. I'll put it up to 525 and we'll just call it even. You know, they're good, right?
Yeah.
And they don't really think about it. There's not much intention there. It's just sort of, oh yeah, that's right. Or you got a bad property manager and they go, oh, keep the tenants around. You want that, right?
Yeah.
But then suddenly, because you weren't deliberate, you weren't intentional, you're now in this boat 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road, when market rent's like 700, 750, and you're still stuck around 550, and you're probably not going to be able, you might not be able to jack it. And sorry, jack's a really bad word. It's not about jacking it. It's It's about the fact that this is an investment you've made and you want to see a return.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about putting the rent up on the tenant just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
To make that clear. But you're now behind because you didn't think very intentionally. You weren't thinking about where you're going to scale to. You weren't thinking about the strategy behind it, right? And that's where the 3 business principles I want to talk about really come into the mix.
Yeah.
Right?
I know our listeners are probably thinking, or any renters out there are thinking, I hope my landlord isn't listening in right now on this.
I mean, yes and no, right? At the end of the day, right? Like, I think most tenants understand this isn't a conversation about like, oh, this person owns the property, so therefore it stopped me from owning it.
Yeah.
I think most people are very well aware of whatever circumstances they're in that may be preventing them from being able to purchase property.
Yeah, exactly right.
Right? Like, I think like it's easy to whinge, and of course some people do, and that's what vocally makes into the media. But I think you'll find most people are like, well, you know what? No, I'm prioritizing holidays with my family. No, I'm prioritizing investing in my business. No, I'm prioritizing this or that, right? So I think most people are very self-aware about it.
I think so.
You know?
Yeah, I agree with you. So what are those 3 business principles that you think every investor needs to be implementing?
All right. So I'll tell you what each one is not what each one is, and then we'll come back to them.
All right, let's do that.
So the first one is cash flow is everything. Cash flow is absolutely everything, right? We'll come back to that, right? Performance requires measurement and metrics. And finally, systems and teams enable scale.
I like it.
You like it?
I like it a lot.
So anyone out there who's listening who's a business owner will probably hear those things and go, oh yeah, I can literally think about how that works.
Alrighty, well let's start off from the top, kicking it off with the cash flow side. Cash flow is king.
All right, so let's start with this, right? So in a business, right, cash flow is everything, right? If I go out and I buy the fancy holidays and the fancy watches and the cars and all the rest, mate, I can't pay you. Right? I can't pay you, right? Good for me, bad for you, right? Same thing in the property portfolio, right? And I want to make it really clear, right? Because there's a bit of a distinction here between business and property, right? When we're talking about cash flow being everything in the property context, we're not talking about necessarily like you need to be positive cash flow from the very first day with the portfolio. I was
going to say that.
You're thinking,
100%, I was coming for you. Yeah.
Right? It's not about that, right? And
Yeah.
what I mean, and I guess take that a little bit further, right? With where rates are at today, right? And it doesn't matter that, you know, we're seeing rate drops happening. Rates are still a little bit higher than where they have been for the last little while. And the last little while, I don't mean the last couple of years. I mean, you know, over the last probably 10 to 15 years, right? And rents have also compressed a lot because of, you know, the intense growth of properties. So we're in this position where it's very hard to buy any property, let alone a high quality investment property that's going to pay you cash flow from day one, right? So I'm not talking about it in that way. What I'm talking about it is deep financial management of the portfolio, right? So that's going to be things like really, and I guess this will link into the second one, which is around performance needs measurements and metrics, right?
Yeah.
Really understanding your own personal cash flows as well as the portfolio cash flows, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Growth in the portfolio is going to be the thing that sets you free, right? That is the thing that will set you free when you've got millions of dollars down the road that hasn't come because you've saved the 50 grand of rent every year that's now maybe 10 at best after all your expenses. It doesn't work like that, right? So it's about being able to be across all of that, right? It's about them being across all the different elements that impact cash flow on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannual, annual basis, right? Like you might be looking at your loans, you might be looking at your buffers, you might be looking at tax variations, you might be looking at your offset accounts, you might be looking at, you know, value adds that you can do to bring in more rent. You might be looking at a million other things that I'm sure we could think about if we sat here for long enough, right? But it's about thinking about all those things and how they tie together on the property side, right? So I'll give you an example. One of my best mates is a client of ours, right? One of my best mates. He's started building out a pretty good portfolio for himself. He's got a few properties, and then we've also helped him on his journey, right? We're going to buy him probably a good couple more this year, right? For him, he's in the position now where borrowing is not really an issue, right? The way he's structured things, the way he set it up, borrowing is not an issue. His issue is cash flow. right? So he knows that after he buys the next 1 or 2 with us this year, that he can't sustain he can't sustain the negative cash flow. He's having fantastic performance. The properties in isolation aren't doing that bad, but when he aggregates them across the portfolio, there's then a bit of a loss, right? But because he understands that cash flow is everything, he's also then implementing other things behind the scenes, because if he didn't make some changes, he probably wouldn't be in a position right now to do the 2 he's probably going to be doing this year.
Do you remember what changes he made?
Well, it was a lot of what we already said, right? So he went and he refinanced the entire portfolio, right?
Yeah.
He was then able to also take out offset accounts, so that way he had a lot of savings that he could park in it to help offset the debt. Which some people go, oh, well, I want the tax deductions. Well, you're still paying the money even with the tax deduction, right? You're just getting a small piece of it back, right?
Yeah.
So it's much smarter to not get back 2/3 of it, much better to not get 1/3 back and still be paying 2/3. Much better to just pay none of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it was things like that, right? It was things like some real strategic renovations to properties to up the cash flow. And he was in a position he could do a bit of work himself. And then also looking at some strategic divestments as well, which freed up some movement within the portfolio, right? So coming back to the principle, right? Cash flow is everything. He could have put himself in hot water if he didn't understand that.
Yeah.
Right? And he's not a business owner.
Yeah. I guess with some of the listeners tuning in, like if they're getting into their first property, and as you said, in the current, I guess, interest rate environment that we're in, finding something that's cash flow positive from day dot, really, really difficult. Really comes down to how much cash you're putting into the deal. And to be frank, you probably need to be putting like a 30% deposit these days in a lot of the markets.
Probably more, to be fair. I'd probably back more.
Probably like 35 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
To be in a position where the property is just going to be self-sustainable from day dot. So I think a lot of people come into this and they're thinking, well, like, yeah, I need to get something that's going to be cash flowing from day dot to be able to get going. But if they're going into those kind of speculative markets where the yields are really high, but the growth prospects are a bit shonky, then it can really kind of put a dampener into, allow them to make their next step with their next purchase. So,
I agree. And I think that comes back to the idea that if you're doing something like that, you're probably not being very strategic. You're probably not thinking like a business owner. You might be thinking about an employee who's had this big shiny idea. You're not thinking like the business owner who's thinking about the second, third, and 10th order effects of a decision.
Yeah. So would you say for someone tuning in, like if they've got a property in their portfolio right now, it's negatively geared, they really want to put themselves in a position to be able to get their next one. Like what are the kind of things that they should be looking at right now then? Like should they be, evaluating their rent? When's the lease going to be expiring soon? Like what other things do they have in place? Do they have a tax variation in place?
Well, honestly, I think that segues perfectly into the second of the 3 principles, right? If you'll let me take it this direction, you'll allow it, right? Performance needs metrics and measurement, right? And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, because you think if you're in that position and you don't think through the decision properly, and by thinking through with data and facts, and you remove emotion and you remove, like some sort of face value, think like, what if I came up to you and I said, Lukey, I got this property that you own, right? You're paying $50,000 a year to hold it, right? I stop there. And then my question is, do you really think that you should be keeping that? Don't you think it might be better to sell it?
Yeah, like...
If I stopped there, I didn't say anything else.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? Right?
Yeah. Who wants to be bleeding 50K?
100%.
For no reason.
Right? So, but what if I now took it one step further and I said, Lukey, you got this property, it's costing you $50,000 a year, right? But you're making $500,000 a year off it in growth.
Yeah, no brainer.
What are you going to do?
You'd obviously keep it in the portfolio.
Yeah? That's my point, right?
Yeah.
If you don't rely on facts to measure your performance, right? Facts to measure plus metrics along the way, you can get caught up in the emotion of somebody going like, oh my God, I'm losing $50,000 a year on this property, right?
Yeah.
Now, I don't want anyone to get me wrong. I don't advocate that, right? Like I think there are much better properties that you can buy. They're going to have much better performance that aren't losing you $50,000 a year. I just want to take a really, really clear cut example for it, right?
Yeah.
My point is that if you attack it emotionally, and a good business owner would never do that. So why would a good portfolio manager or portfolio operator, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it emotionally, go, I'm losing $50,000 a year, and you haven't done the measurements and the metrics, you've now made a bad decision. You've possibly sold an asset that's doing really well for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think something that gets brought up, especially when I'm speaking to clients, when we're looking at what their financial position is going to be looking like with this next purchase. Like a lot of the time they're going to be negative initially, right? Like depending, like if they're doing an equity purchase or putting like 10% deposit down, like the reality is you're going to be in the red. But what they want to understand is how long is it going to take them to get to a position where the property is self-sustainable, right? And that's identifying the things that you can be doing to the property. Can you do some cosmetic renos to be able to increase the rent, right? Like, can you be doing cosmetic reno to increase the equity so you can pull the equity out a bit sooner to put into the next opportunity? So absolutely agree with everything you were saying in terms of understanding the metrics of the asset and the performance side of things to set yourself up to be able to go again.
And I think that then if we link this back to the business conversation, you can hear, I love it. I love this business. Maybe I should start a business podcast, right? I love this stuff, right? If you link that back, right, a business owner is going to go and track their revenue. They're going to track their costs. They're going to track their margin. They're going to track their other expenses. They're going to be tracking how that's changed. They're going to be tracking, projects that they've undertaken and how much that might have returned. A million things, right? A million things. So going into what you're talking about, right, I think that if you take that in a property context, if you're tracking the same type of metrics, but on your property portfolio, right, so you're probably not calculating your margin, but you very well could be, right? But you're tracking certain metrics, right? Like you're looking at your growth, you're looking at your rent increases, you're looking at your yields, you're looking at your expense rates, you're looking at your LVRs, you're looking at your expense ratios. There's obviously more and more. I don't want to keep going through lists of things, right? But by doing that, same as a business owner, you can then identify opportunities. Like a business owner who does that can sit back and go, oh, well, I've just done the breakdown of our revenue and we're getting, 80% over here. Yeah. But it costs us we have a very low margin on that. Yeah. We have this other thing over here that isn't making us a lot of money right now, but the margin's really, really high. Yeah. So think about the property context of exactly like what you were saying. You're going, well, now you can identify the opportunities to go, well, we could do that. We could do this. We could change that.
And I know how, you have, really, really big plans for Atlas, and you'd be thinking, well, if I'm bringing this type of person into the business to achieve X goal, we obviously need to be able to cover their wages, their expenses and whatnot. So what do we need to be changing? Do we need to turn up marketing to be able to bring in more opportunities so we can obviously do those kind of things, right? So it's the same kind of mindset.
For sure. And then it's just how do you apply it to property, right? Now it might be, oh, well, in business, I'm using this marketing provider and they cost me X and I don't really feel like they're giving me a good return, but I found this other provider and it might not be that they cost me less. They might actually cost me more, but I can see that what they're doing, they should deliver me a better result. So I'm going to get a better ROI. Yeah. Think of property context, right? Maybe it's your property manager. Your property manager, you've gone out and you've gone to the market and you've gone, I want the cheapest property management rate. And now you're paying the cheapest property management rate, but not only are they adding on all these extra costs, so it's not really a true reflection of your expenses, because you've got to add it on so that the actual property management rate might be 1-2% higher, whatever it might be. Just picking a number.
And just for our listeners, what kind of additional costs might that be?
Oh, it could be things to do with like the letting fees. It could be things to do with the marketing fees. It could be things to do like admin fees, reporting costs, things like that, right? As well as like if I probably wouldn't include it in this, but like say you had to go to the tribunal and they charge extra for that, things like that, right? Sure. Obviously, it's not a good position. It's probably a bit outside the norm, but like those sorts of things, right? Yeah. But now you go, well, I'm actually going to go with a more expensive property manager, but they have a way better reputation, way better name. They have a way better tenant data pool. They reckon they could get me an extra $40-$50 a week in rent, whatever it might be, right? Something like that. Plus, all those other fees are actually wrapped up. So the net result is maybe I'm only paying 0.5% more, but I'm getting an extra, $50 of rent. Yeah. And people might laugh and think, how could that be the case? It's, at the end of the day, the property's going to rent what it's going to rent for. But that's absolutely not true. I have seen top tier property managers get rent for some property that I go, wow, you've really earned your fee there. Right?
I guess with with what we do on the portfolio review side, I know
Yeah.
you do a lot of them, and I know we've got our portfolio strategy team as well that pump through heaps of them every week. I guess, how often would you see someone that's really, really shocked after doing a review?
I reckon 90%. Actually, no. You know what? I'll take that down to 85, right? And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I'll just run the numbers in my head. Like the scene out of The Hangover when when Alan's running the blackjack numbers, right? Now, I'm obviously making the number up, but the vast majority, but still a little bit back from just saying a 99%, right? I'll tell you why. Because there's usually two key demographics that we get through people that do the portfolio review, right? The first one is the people who have no idea about what's going on in their portfolio. So naturally, they are just absolutely shocked, right? The second side is for somebody to do that. Often they're actually very proactive people. Like if they're willing to go and do a portfolio review through us, they're often actually really proactive people. So they might be managing it themselves. So in those circumstances, they're maybe not so surprised about some of the results of their property. They're going, oh yeah, I thought that was the case for this and that. But where we get them is when we make comparisons to how they've performed against the market and things like that, because they often don't have access to that high fidelity and level of data that we do, so that we can track a lot of different performance measures that other people can't. That's where they get surprised.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they're very proactive people.
Yeah.
Right? But they don't have access to some of the things that we do to do it. Right?
I'm just trying to think. Something that's pretty common that I hear from people that we do the reviews for is they come out of that review with so many different things that they could be implementing to their existing portfolio, but also just on the structuring side of things. Like if they've structured things a certain way where they've just capped themselves out from a serviceability perspective, and then they've got a property in their portfolio that is in their own personal name that isn't performing, it kind of puts the nail in the coffin to help them make that decision on, potentially looking to liquidate and then repurposing those funds in a stronger market, but structuring it the right way as well.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? I can't add anything extra onto that. I agree with you 100%, right? But a lot of this comes down to, and I guess we'll take it on to the third principle, right? At the end of the day, all of this relies on somebody who is self-motivated, somebody who cares deeply about what they're doing. Because you go ask any business owner, they will tell you that they care so deeply and that they, like nobody cares more than them, right? Like, for example, like take me in this scenario, right? I love to make it about me sometimes, right? Everyone knows, I have lots of media commitments. I'm out of the office a lot of the time doing things like that, right? I obviously do a lot of podcasting. I then also meet with a lot of partners, clients, all the rest, right?
I tell you what, you've upgraded from E-grade celebrity to D-grade now.
How long have you waited to say that? Right? And everyone makes the joke. They're like, oh, you're not even here or something like that, right? But everyone also knows that nobody cares about Atlas more than I do, right? Everyone knows that I will be the first one in and the last one out when it needs to be happening, right? And that when I'm not there, I'm probably at home working on it, right? All right. Yeah,
keep telling us.
I just need it on the record. I need it on the record. But you know what I mean, right? Like nobody cares more than the business owner, and you need to be like that with your property portfolio, which is the segue into the third of the three principles, right? Which is that systems and teams enable scale, right? And to me, this is the easiest one to talk about, right? When you're a business owner, 99 times out of 100, the first employee is you, right? You wear every hat, you do every single thing, and that's because you just don't have the money to hire people. You're not at that position yet. Obviously, if you're going to raise capital or something, maybe that's not the case.
Yeah.
But more often than not, you are the first and only employee, right? You can't scale a business that way, right? Like I cannot take every sales call. I cannot buy every property. I cannot do every property review. I can't do every portfolio plan. I can't do it.
You did at one point.
I know, right?
You're wearing all the hats.
Do you remember how burnt out I was?
Yeah, man. You look like you were like 40 when you were like the rings under your eyes at that time.
It's always the baby face
but
stuff.
It wasn't, mate, it wasn't until you kind of put that faith in me, mate. You put that faith in me and you're like, Lukey, like I am going to give you this responsibility. Look after this for me. And then look where we are today.
Oh, God, you've waited to say so many things on this podcast, haven't you? But there is some truth to what you're saying, right? I couldn't have scaled, right? I couldn't have scaled without having awesome people around me.
Yeah. Well,
like you.
Yeah.
Like you, right?
But there's a ceiling to DIY, right?
And that's it, right? That's I
what
guess
it comes down to.
That's the long and the short of it is you can do your own taxes, you could do your property management. I mean, there's some things people outsource anyway from the start, and I feel like property management is usually one of them, right? But you can do all these things. You can do the research. You can do, the negotiation. You can do the area identification. You can self-manage the property. You can do your own tax. There are so many things you can do, but the best investors don't do it. Same as the best business owners are the ones who then enable systems and teams for their scale, right? You need to do the same in your property portfolio because the reality is that the broker knows more than you ever will about finance, right? Especially if you're an individual investor, right? They're going to know more than you than you ever will, right? Yep. Your accountant is going to have a way better idea on not only how to just do the simple tax aspects of it, but how to do things like estate planning, planning around bigger tax considerations if you was, for example, to sell or do other things.
Purchasing entities.
Entities, right? Same thing for your lawyers, like when you're doing the conveyancing to make sure things go well. The property manager knows how, the types of tenants you're going to get and how to best market to them. And your buyer's agent is going to have far more time and resources to do the research and everything else that comes with it, right? And that's just the people off the top of my head, right? And then it also comes down to systems, You need to have systems set up. You can't just have your email account with emails everywhere. You can't just have bills printed out lying all over the house, And the best part of all of this, right, is once you stop trying to DIY it and you get these professionals, most of these professionals will already have tools that you can probably use to make sure that you've then got the systems in place.
I was about to say that.
To complement the team.
Exactly right. Because people are probably thinking, well, what kind of systems can I put together to help facilitate everything and make sure it's running smoothly? But like you said, if you've got the right professionals in your corner, they already have the tools that they're bringing in, right?
But it's one of those things, some people, a lot of it can be chicken and the egg. Yeah. But if you've got good people around you, they can actually tell you what did come first, the chicken or the egg, Yeah. And then you're set up to be able to scale, thinking now like a business owner, because you now think about your property portfolio. You're a deep asset manager now, right? And it doesn't matter that you don't own the biggest portfolio. It doesn't matter that you don't own 100, because the thing is, and this is what happens in business, if you don't have the right systems in place when the issue is small, all you're going to do is compound that problem when it gets bigger, right? Like if you don't have good systems in place when you've got 3 staff members, when you have 10, that doesn't suddenly make the issue better because you didn't have the systems. It's the same as property. If you don't have the right systems at 2 or 3 properties, when you get to 5 or 6 or 8 to 10, you're going to be in an even compounded worse position.
Yeah. Well, we often see, especially with people just starting out on their journey, they're just like, I'll just go straight to a bank myself, like my local bank, or I'll just use one of my mates who's an accountant. Yeah. Like they're not really trying to find the right professionals to build a scalable portfolio. They're just like, who do I need just to get this first one underway? Yeah. They don't have that foresight.
Or even when different professionals are then giving advice, and it's not about not fact checking your professionals. I think that's really important, but it's about not doing it based on facts and metrics and all the rest, based on doing it off emotion, right? Like, for example, sometimes we'll have a client who we present an area to them that we're going to look in, right? And it might be one of 5 areas that we're looking in for them. And they'll say, we're not sure if we want to be in that area, right? Whatever it is. Doesn't matter where it is. It could be an area of a capital city. It could be a huge regional. It could be a smaller regional. It doesn't matter. Wherever it is, right? Yeah. And then we'll say, why? And they'll just say, I just don't know. I just don't know I just don't think it's a good area to be in. I go, okay. But you've just had 20 pages of research and reports. You've got videos breaking it down. You've got, other things that our clients get. Yeah. What part of that don't you agree with? Yeah. We're not saying you're wrong, just that help us understand so we can shape this. I go,
And then on top of that, what's your alternative? What market do you think we should be buying?
Exactly right.
And what is that backed by?
And that's why, taking those principles, right? A business owner can't afford to be emotional and to go, you walk in and have a problem that you're presenting to me. And, sometimes I can get a bit funny about things, same as anyone. Maybe I just had a bad day and, lose the temper a bit or something like that, right? Get a bit frustrated. You're laughing, thinking about last week. But it's human nature, right? Things happen. But the point is that if as a business owner, you can't recognize that and adjust, you're going to make really bad decisions for your business. It's going to affect people.
Yeah.
It's going to affect people, affect output, affect clients, whatever it might be, right? But a lot of people don't recognize the same when it comes to their property portfolio.
Yeah.
So I want to give a really quick example.
All
right?
Yep.
So one of our clients, right? Pretty good client. His name was Steve. Well, his name is Steve, not was. He's still called Steve. There's nothing that's changed about him there, right? Steve. So Steve came to us, and I think I just really like to loop this in because I think it's a good example of it, right? Steve came to us, and he already owned, I think it was one property. It was one or two. No, it was one property. It was one. It wasn't two. It was one property, and we've now bought 3 properties for him, right? We bought 3 properties for him over about 18 months, I think, roughly about 18 months, right? I've told the story wrong. I've gone around in circles, right? He had 4 properties. He came to us with 3. We bought the first, and now he's still at 4, but we've bought 2 more for him, right? So what happened was when he first came to us, he didn't really have a method to his madness, right? He was doing exactly like what we were talking about, not really thinking very strategically, didn't really have a plan. He wasn't thinking like a business owner. He was just a guy who, kind of like we said at the start, just like he thought that the success was buying property, not the outcomes from it, right? So we bought him his first property, and we took him up to 4. And then we had a really tough conversation with him to say, mate, like you're all over the shop, right? Do you remember? I haven't even. Do you remember Steve?
Yeah, I remember Steve.
Yeah.
I spoke to him.
Recently?
I think like a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So we all still remember Steve. Anyway, so we had that tough conversation. Said, mate, like you're a bit all over the shop. Like we're trying to drive you towards your goals. You've got a great portfolio plan with us, but we need to make some adjustments. We want to do this portfolio review for you. Even for our clients, it costs money because of how deep it is. And Steve was like, "Yep, all good, guys. I'll pay it. It wasn't too much. I think it was only maybe like $700 for him, $800, something like that. Nothing crazy. When you own 4 properties, bloke has millions of dollars of assets, and we're reviewing it for $700. Pretty small in the scheme of it. Anyway, to cut a long story short, when we did the review, we were able to kind of really pinpoint and identify for him using metrics, using numbers, using facts around his performance about why he was all over the shop, why he was really going to struggle to get to where he wanted to. One of my favorite things about Steve, like any of our clients that are like him, is they listen to advice. It doesn't mean they always agree with it, but they listen to advice. And because it's like, you can tell when you're in a conversation with somebody and they're not listening.
Yeah.
Right? They hear you, but they're not listening to you, right? Steve is a bloke who listens, right? So I remember, he went away. And basically coming out of it, we said, look, the 2 of your 3 properties that you own before us, we are not sure that they're right for you, right? Like wrong stage of the portfolio. One of them probably wasn't the greatest asset anyway. And you've made some money on it, but not as much as you should have based on when you did invest in those. We think you should go away and consider whether retaining those is the right idea, right? Anyway, Steve.
I guess what do you think is like, what would be the danger if he had have kept those properties in the portfolio beyond just, I guess, dollars and cents?
Yeah. To me, the biggest danger was that he probably wasn't going to achieve his financial goals, which, like, honestly, I reckon the vast majority of people that we work with, and probably just most people in general, it was ideally an earlier retirement, a better and safer retirement, so that he could spend time with his family. That was it. It's nothing like the bloke doesn't want to own a private jet. The bloke doesn't, want to be Elon Musk. He doesn't want to go to the casino and gamble, a couple of grand every week. He just wants to spend time with his family. He loves his family, and he doesn't want to work to being 70. That's it.
He's a good bloke.
He's a good bloke. Yeah. Anyway, so we come back to it, and he comes back to us, and he went to sell 2 of those properties, right? Got got a good result,
Yep.
made a little bit of money. When he took out all the costs, wasn't probably as much as he would have liked to, but he could see, he listened and he went down the path. We were on the fence about the third one. And we said to him, like, look, yeah, we are on the fence. Ultimately, you got to make a decision on all of them, but we're on the fence. And he agreed with us. He said, look, we'll err on the side of caution. We'll get rid of 2. Anyway, cut a long story short, that then obviously took him back to 2 assets, one that he owned before us, the one that we just bought for him,
Yep.
and then it freed up a lot of ability for us to start scaling him properly. And then he bought 2 of those properties within about 6 months of each other, 6 to 9 months of each other. And then now I think he's, what, is he coming for his 4th? Or you said he's supposed to be another week.
I think he's looking at getting into that next one.
Okay,
as
well, there you go,
so-
right? But
yeah.
all because of that, right? You wouldn't have been able to do that without having that thought. And I guess
Yeah.
to relate it back to the business owner analogy, sometimes you have to let staff go if they underperform. Sometimes you have to drop products
Yeah.
if they don't perform, right? Sometimes you have to close a part of the business if it's not doing what it's meant to do. And it sucks, and you often will lose money, and you'll probably be very upset about it, and you've lost a lot of time and energy. But
You've got to be cutthroat.
exactly
sometimes.
right.
Yeah.
And you can't let it get in the way.
So I guess how can people start to operate their portfolio like a business then?
I think for me, the first and most important thing is you have to regularly, I'm tongue-tied, mate. Regularly review performance, right? Your metrics, right? So we talked about it in our last episode, right?
We did.
And, you know, we said the fact that, like, most people, you probably don't need to review your performance, like, in terms of, like, your growth and things like that, any earlier than, say, 12 months. Some people might want to do 6 if they feel really proactive,
Yeah.
but probably not any more than 12, right? And, of course, we stand by that. But that was also around some of the more larger metrics, like, for example, growth, which it takes time to see that growth built in where it's recognized by the system, right?
Yeah.
System being valuers and banks and all the rest, right? But there is nothing that says you can't run reviews, you know, more frequently, probably not monthly, maybe say quarterly, about more of the deeper finance related stuff, right? Like your cash flows, you know, like a profit and loss statement, right? Like how is some of that side going with the portfolio, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying you need to, I'm just saying you could, because you can go and see your outgoings. You can go and see how that's changing, especially as your portfolio gets bigger. That's a bit to review,
Yeah.
you know? So for me, I would say that is key.
Okay.
That'd be number 1.
Regular reviews.
Regular
Got it.
reviews, yeah.
Okay.
I think your second one is you need to start to build out those systems, right? And I think an easy way to start is, you know, having a really good Excel sheet, you know, KPI type sheet or a dashboard type sheet,
Yeah.
where you can start to plug in those numbers and you can see how that's going, right? You need to have those systems in place, right? Then, you know, set up a system in your emails, you know, like here's a hot tip, right? You can set up rules in your inbox, and when emails come from a certain person or whatever, they go into a certain folder, right?
Here we go. We've got the Outlook whiz over here.
You know, but just things like
Yeah,
that, like
no, it's beneficial for sure.
exactly right, you know, and like obviously then you might not get the alert on your phone that you got an email, but then it's up to you to go, well, I check my emails every day or a couple times a week. I just need to make sure I go to that folder and check it, right? But now suddenly everything's in one spot. And you're not all over the place trying to find things. Did I save it? Did I delete it? Is it in a folder? Is it not, right? So setting up those systems, but I think honestly, like that kind of dashboard or KPI sheet, or I mean, that's very business owner type mindset, but you know, like a portfolio analysis sheet, that is key. That is key because it gives you a place that you can also then historically look back.
Yeah.
You know? You then also need to be really brutally honest with yourself. So what I mean by that is when you're doing these reviews, when you're looking at your numbers, you need to think like a business owner. You can't be emotional about it. You have to be cutthroat. And you have to, maybe you need to think about your property like an employee. Like if you had an employee that did nothing but cost you money,
Yeah.
and again, the property context, we're not talking about like negative cash flow because you've got to think about the growth and the rents and all the rest that come with it, right? But if you're a business owner, you had an employee that was costing you, you know, 30 grand a year after you account for all the money they make, but all the, you know, money you pay them and the expenses with it, you'd think they're an underperformer.
Yeah.
Would you keep somebody like that?
No, definitely not.
Right?
Definitely not.
So you got to think about the same in your portfolio. But it's not just about the properties. It's also about your professionals, right? Like if you have
Okay, but going back to that though, because I just had a thought. Like if you had an employee, right, that you had them for like 5 months, coming up to that end of the probationary period, right? At face value, you're kind of like, oh, I don't know if they're cut out for it. But behind the scenes, they're grinding. They're putting in the extra work. They're trying to build their knowledge base. They could potentially be a real solid asset for the business, right? You compare that to property. You might have a property in your portfolio that you think is underperforming right now, but if you were to conduct a thorough market analysis and you're having a look at things like the macroeconomic trends of the market pressure indicators, and you were of the understanding that it's actually a market that could actually see some beneficial growth over the shorter term, particularly, then what kind of decision do you think you'd be making then?
Welcome to life as a business owner, right? It's not like high school where you can flip to the back of the book and see the answers for your maths question, right? At the end of the day, that's where it then comes down to your professional judgment, right? And I say that even if you don't do property professionally, it still comes down to your professional judgment, right? Same as an employee. If they're grinding and their probation's 6 months, and you're really thinking about, is this somebody that's going to be right for the business? Maybe they're just a bit slower, and that's fine, right? But they're a great asset. Maybe they have other redeeming qualities. At the end of the day, they've got to do their core job, but you're on the fence. You're going to have to make a decision. You have to make a decision on whether or not you actually think they're going to get there.
Yeah.
Right? Same as property.
Yeah.
But the key is, if you can't make that decision, you then need help.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was getting to, right? Like if you feel that you're in a market, you feel like the feeling in your bones is that the property isn't really performing, but you have nothing to really validate that feeling.
Yeah.
Right? Where do you go to? Because most people don't actually understand
For sure.
how to conduct a market analysis, for example.
Or have the tools to do it properly, right? But think about it, right? One of the guys, who works under you, right? Like I obviously know them all. I have a really good idea of where they're at, but I'm probably not the best person to make the start of that decision on whether or not we keep them. You would be the start of that because you see so much more than I do. I then get to overlay my experience to go based off what you're telling me, what I see, that makes sense. We're going to do X. But it's the same as property.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, right? If you don't have it, you need to go and get it. You need to, right?
Yeah.
Which I think then comes to the final piece about operating your portfolio like a business, which is you need to know when to adjust, right? Whatever that adjustment might be, whether that's actually, you know what? No, I'm going back. I'm going back for a minute. You interrupted my train of thought. I'm going back. We're talking about it. We're talking about keeping it unemotional, right?
Yeah.
And like critically analyzing it. Then you so rudely cut over the top with a great question, right? But where I was going with this was everybody's first thought on that question is always about like, do I keep a property? Do I sell it?
Yeah.
Right? But this is what I'm saying. People have got to broaden. You've got to broaden your mindset. If you're going to think like a business owner, it's not just about the property, right? Because it's not just about a single team member, right? It's also about, in the property context, do you have the right professionals around you, right? And then what I mean by that is, if you take that to a business context, do you have a good staff member, but he's in the wrong part of your business, right? Like, same thing here, right? I'm not saying that your property manager becomes your lawyer. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, you might have a problem with the asset. You might have a problem somewhere else that then makes the asset not look as good, right? So like, for example, you might have a property manager who you think's really good, but you keep having issues with tenants and you've turned over tenants and you're still having issues and you back your property manager because you've got no reason not to. But then you think, you know what, maybe it's not the property that's a problem. Maybe it's the property manager. And you go to another property manager and you find out that really they just weren't vetting properly.
Right.
And the way they presented it to you, it made it seem like it was, but it really wasn't. So now you've got a property that is actually performing really well, right? So it's when you're evaluating things yourself, it's not just about, is it about keeping the property or not? You've got to look 360 degrees about all of it. Yeah. Right?
Do you feel better about getting that one out?
I feel a lot better. I've got it off my chest. But now we come back. Now we come back to my last one, which was about adjusting course. Is that what you were going to take to?
Yes.
You were?
Yeah.
Sorry, I came over you. Call that scissor paper rank. For me, this is the hard part, right? Like, people become invested in their decisions. People don't want to be seen to have made a wrong decision. I get it. We've talked about it a lot on different episodes of this podcast. I've talked about it on many, many podcasts over many, many years and in many, many contexts as well. But at the end of the day, emotion is the enemy of performance, right? Whether it's in business, whether it's in property, you have to take the emotion out. You have to be focused on facts and figures, and especially at the early stage of your journey, right? Once you get more experience, maybe you can have a little bit more room for intuition. But before you've had the chance to develop that intuition, you've got to trust the facts and the figures. And that could be changing professionals. It could be changing properties. It could be, doing something else that's not coming to my mind as we near the end of the episode, right? Yeah. But it's about knowing when to change course.
Alrighty. So to recap in 3 words.
Yeah.
Cash flow, metrics, systems.
Love it.
That's what we're all about, right? So I guess before we kind of close off this episode, if someone is listening and they're realizing they've been winging it, where should they start? Like, what should they be doing?
Well, I mean, there's 2 things here, right? Like, if you feel like you've been winging it in your portfolio, come and let us review it for you, right? We'll break that down, pretty cost effective, and you're going to get that advice, right? You're going to get that advice that you might be lacking, right? So come to our website, atlaspropertygroup.com.au/portfolio review. Very difficult to remember. /portfolio review, right? Drop your details in there. We will get in touch with you and we'll set you up for a portfolio review, right? The second part of that, though, is if you feel like you've been winging it and you're now talking about your purchasing journey, come and have a chat with us about helping you buy your next property. Come and have a chat with us about building out your portfolio plan so that you can make sure you're on the right trajectory, right? And for that, just go to our website, atlaspropertygroup.com.au, and drop your details in for a free call from the team, right? And who knows, maybe you'll even luck out and get Lukey on the phone with you.
Here we go.
So that's what people should do if they feel like they've been winging it.
Beauty. Awesome. Sounds good, mate. Well, always a pleasure jumping into the studio with you, mate. Anything that you want to kind of round it off with?
Nah, mate. I think we got some really exciting things going on at Atlas. I think by the time we record our next episode, we'll have filmed another couple of episodes of the show. So that'll be exciting.
Very interesting.
But otherwise, everyone's gonna have to wait till.
Are you gonna remember me when you're famous?
Well, if I've gone from E grade to D grade, how high can I climb?
Oh, mate, I reckon if you play your cards right, you might get a couple of gigs here and there on a couple of other networks. You might get up to C pretty
C,
quickly.
Yeah, C, yeah. We're going like, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here.
I want to see you
I'm
on
a C grade.
Dancing with the Stars.
Dancing with the Stars. You know what? Maybe on another show.
With your 2 left feet? I don't think so, buddy.
Well, on that note, guys, thanks for tuning in. We love doing this, with each other to share our knowledge. And if you're really enjoying it, please make sure you drop us 5 stars. And also, if you've got any feedback or things you want to hear us talk about, please get in contact with us either through the website or via email. And we'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, until next time, thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.